Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Operation Miss podcast. I am so excited because I actually get to be physically present with this beautiful woman this time. We have been recording virtually for I don't know how long for these podcasts, and so to be able to sit with a missed mom just brings me so much joy. But the purpose of the podcast is to equip ladies and listeners so that they can survive pregnancy, show up to pregnancy as healthy as possible, and then recover well afterwards. And I am telling you, I cannot think of a better person to equip these women in this moment during these times than Monique. And I have known her prior to Operation Miss, though, so I fell in love with her years and years ago. And so to be able to walk these journeys with her, with you, has been such an honor. So I am excited to introduce her and for her to introduce herself to you all, and then we'll jump right into her beautiful birth stories. So, Monique, please introduce yourself to the listeners.
Hey, everyone. As you heard, my name is Monique. I've known Catherine for a while now, so I'm glad to be able to do this podcast. And both of my pregnancy journeys have been with Mist and with Catherine, so I'm just glad to share my story this time. And I'm a mom of two. I have a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old, so I'm still kind of new to motherhood, but learning as I go. And I'm just glad to be here.
Yay! Okay, so why don't we talk about your first journey to delivery? So when we met, or not when we met, but when you jumped onto Miss the first time, you were kind of at the end of your journey, right? And so tell us what happened toward the end of your journey and how your delivery went as a result.
Okay, so I think the whole pregnancy, I was like hoping, or just thinking that my birth would be like the natural route or like the vaginal route, and then towards the end, like the very end, was when I found out that I would be having a C-section. But before that, when I joined Miss, I think it was like January, and I delivered in June. So before that, I just started learning way more about my body. Like before the first few months of pregnancy, I really probably didn't know anything about pregnancy, about babies, about my body. So that second half of the pregnancy, I felt a little bit more comfortable with like going into delivery or going into the doctor's office and asking certain questions. But do you want me to go into like the delivery and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, so the provider that I had, it wasn't a provider that I feel like I vetted well. So I was surprised that towards the end of the pregnancy, she didn't feel comfortable for me to deliver vaginally. So I wasn't induced. I was just told that I had to schedule a C-section, and that was like a really big surprise to me. That was kind of hard to deal with, but the C-section went well, the delivery went well, and my recovery went well.
So remember, during your delivery though, so the delivery did go well, but then do you remember what happened after the delivery?
I was about to go into that. So after that delivery, I hemorrhaged. So I don't remember when it was. I think it was like the second day I was in the hospital. Right. The nurse was telling me that I was so out of it, and I think I had forgotten to wake up and feed Naomi, my baby, at the time. And she was like, "You're really out of it." And she was worried about me. So they checked my blood, and I think my hemoglobin was at 6. And so she ordered a blood transfusion, and I realized that I was like overly tired, but if she hadn't like noticed that I was out of it, she would have known to like check my blood or order that. So
right. And I think it's so important, because I remember when we chatted and I was like, "How are you feeling?" And you were like, "I'm tired, but I just had the baby." It's like we think of those as it being normal, that something is going wrong. But with the watch on the device, you're able to see that so blue is like everything is cool. So if you have on the watch and you're looking at your app, blue is like I'm cool, everything's fine. Orange is stress, and stress is normal, right? So if we're exercising or eating or just like getting up to take a shower, we're going to see a little bit of stress. But following delivery, we're not supposed to see all of that stress. We're supposed to see the exact opposite of that. And so she went in the opposite direction. But it was nice though, after she got the transfusion, to be able to see, okay, I'm blue again, and it's okay to go home. I think that as women, sometimes we're scared after things like that happen, right? And we don't know, is it okay for me to go or not? And so it's good to just have some feedback. And so from our standpoint, it was like a sigh of relief to see how quickly and how effectively the blood transfusion helped get you back on track. Because it can be scary to lose that much blood, really. And then, like you said, to be unaware that it's even happening.
Yeah, because I always heard of like people needing blood transfusions, but when it was me, I was like, I didn't realize how serious that was right after birth. And so I just always thought, I don't know, even when I was having the blood transfusion, I didn't think like it was something traumatic, but it could be, if it wasn't caught. So
yeah, it wasn't caught. Okay, so recovery went well, and then you're home and you're happy, you have a perfect baby, and then you get pregnant again. Yes, and that was exciting. It was so exciting to I don't know, just to experience it with you again the second time around. And I just think that, I mean, you had been to so many, you showed up differently to this pregnancy, I felt like. What do you feel was different? And then talk with us about the vetting process, because I really enjoyed watching you like vet this time. So what, if a woman is listening, what should the vetting process look like, do you think?
Okay, so just going into the second pregnancy, I wasn't discouraged from the first time of having a C-section. And so my whole idea was like, oh, this time I'm doing a VBAC, a vaginal birth after cesarean. So I was looking first for somebody who was just like more of a birth center type of place, the natural route, like where I can just maybe sit in a tub or something like that. And so I had to kind of find places that would take my insurance. But I quickly found out that the birth centers near us wouldn't take me because I had the C-section, so it was too much of a high-risk pregnancy. But I just kind of researched like VBAC friendly doctors in the area, and I would just research. I would call and say like, do you guys support vaginal birth at the delivery? And they're just like, some of them just straight out said like, not so much. And so I found one close to me that it said on their website that they support VBACs. And when I called, that's what they said. And even when I was talking to the doctors, I asked certain questions. So I remember like you gave me a list of questions, Dr. Amber gave me a list of questions, and I think I asked like most of the questions, and the answers sounded good. So they said, they said yes. And I remember one of the questions I asked was, I just basically asked like, are you guys VBAC friendly? They said yes, but they don't induce because of the high risk of that. So I was okay with that. And then it wasn't until a few appointments later that I found out there were more like limitations or restrictions that they had for VBAC. So one was I had to deliver by 41 weeks, and then I would have to schedule. So to me, it's important to ask all the questions up front. I didn't think to ask those types of questions, but I remember you told me like, if they have those restrictions, they may not be that VBAC friendly.
Right.
And so I would say, as far as vetting, get really specific. Like, get specific. Like, if I go over term, would you guys still support me trying for labor? If I don't know, like, what do you guys think about, uterine rupture? Do you guys think it's a big deal? Like, they had it on a paper that they gave me, and I signed it and everything, but I don't think I really went into depth with those questions. So.
Right. I love that you said that, because there is a difference between being VBAC tolerant and VBAC friendly, and then also being comfortable delivering a baby with VBAC. So you could be all friendly until it's actually time for it to happen. Yeah. And so, just knowing, well, how many VBACs have you done? How many have you delivered this month? How many did you induce? How many did you... Yeah, I love that you said that. Girls need to be prepared. We deserve to know.
Yeah. And another thing was the doctor's office that I went to, it was a group of midwives and doctors. So I quickly found out that some midwives were very supportive of VBACs and some were not. Yeah. And I think I met like a couple doctors. It was like a big group of doctors, but it was the midwives. Some of them would say, oh, you're almost 40 weeks, so let's go ahead and schedule that C-section. And I quickly knew, like, they're not really supporting the VBAC. And then others were I've seen all kinds of women deliver. It doesn't matter if you're small, it doesn't matter, and they were very supportive. So I think in my mind before delivery, I was thinking like who I wanted to be in the delivery room and who I really didn't want to be there. So.
Yes. And I think it's more than the answers to the questions. It's the feel that you get when you're in the presence, and then also the comments that they make along the way. That sometimes tells you a whole lot more.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so adjustment. So let's talk about, you talked about Dr. Amber and some questions that she sent you as well. I love her. I know you love her. What would you say helped you? What did you do throughout your pregnancy to make sure that you were healthy as possible?
Okay, so I was really big on trying to lower stress. So
that was a big part.
It was a huge part. I think it was around, like I was always conscious of my body battery, like heart rate, and just the sleep quality. And I just wanted to make sure my stress was down. So I would look at it every day. Probably too much, but
never too much.
I remember in April I had taken a trip with my daughter, who's 2, to New York. And after that trip, it felt like my body battery never recovered. So it was just, like at 5 every day. And so at that point, it was when I realized, like, if I don't do things to consciously lower my stress, then I'll have, maybe more complications going into delivery. So I like the fact that every time I was worried about the stress, you guys were always sending me, like, positive things, positive ways to think about it, positive ways to look at it. And one of the main decisions was choosing not to work at the very end of my pregnancy. So yeah. I remember I was doing temporary work, and it was like 6 weeks at a time, and it was at home. But just the fact that I was sitting down all the time, and I had my toddler while I was working, it wasn't hard work, but I know that it was taking a toll on my body. So I had an opportunity to do one more round of work, and it was going to go right up to delivery. But I talked with my husband, and we both decided that in order to lower the stress, I wouldn't take on that job. So.
Yeah, I was so proud of you. Oh my gosh, we were so proud of you because I think sometimes, you're welcome, sometimes when women get pregnant the second time, they're like, I don't remember it being this tired. I don't remember it being this hard. And it's like, no, you didn't have a baby before.
Yeah.
And so that ends up being the difference. And so you can quickly see how your body can, just have a harder time recovering. Mm-hmm. And so trying to stay ahead of that is good, but then also just making the decision as a couple that we are going to do everything we can to show up to delivery healthy. Mm-hmm. And so I just think turning down money is hard, especially when you have a beautiful home like this and a whole, you have children, you have obligations, and you make the best decision for you. And I think that awareness is the best gift that we can give ourselves as women. Because I think sometimes, you may not feel run down, but if this says that you are, then it helps you to have a conversation, an objective conversation about how to lower your stress so that you can charge. Because on days when you did charge, you're like, oh my God, yes. So good. But it takes intentionality, and you were intentional, and I think that it pays off.
Yeah, and I want to add, because you're saying the watch helps you, be aware, but it also helped me with the conversation with my husband, because I was able to show him, like, look, it's just all orange right now. Yes. It's no blue. He now he understands, what that means. So when he was getting it when I said maybe I don't need to work, but if I didn't have that concrete, colorful data, he might have been like, oh sure, you're stressed,
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And then did you feel, so once you did that, how did that make you feel? Did you feel less stressed mentally? Did you, how did you feel making that decision for yourself, for your sweet baby?
It really was like a weight lifted. So I know I was giving up money, so there was a little stress in that area. But in general, the end of my pregnancy, to me, I was like really peaceful. Like it was calm. I was going into delivery pretty confident. So all I had to do was worry about, my daughter. So I wasn't like just doing. I had stopped, I had projects that I was doing for other people at one point. I just kind of put a stop to it. towards the end of the pregnancy and was like, hey, I'll get back to you like after, you know. And that helped a lot.
And we deserve to do that as women. You know, I love that you said you were watching all the things, sleep quality, your stress, your heart rate, your oxygen, all of that changes during pregnancy. And so if we don't make an external change, it's like our bodies are just going to continue to absorb all of the stress of that. And we deserve a break, you know.
I agree.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, of course, it's my, to tell people, what do you do? So you take on projects for what?
Oh, yeah. So I do, I was ghostwriting at the time, so I've done that twice, and that's something I'm just like getting into. I was doing like websites for people and running somebody else's social media. So for a church, I run their social media.
Look
and
at
so,
you.
Thanks. And then the actual like temporary job, I was a scoring assistant, meaning like when kids have those standardized tests, I help score them online. So.
Very neat. Yeah. Okay, yes, because I've seen some of your beautiful websites.
Oh,
and so, yes. And so since having Nyla, have you picked up websites again, or what are you doing now?
No, I'm really just like full swing stay-at-home mom. But I do run the social media because that's actually, to me, a creative outlet, and I like doing that. So I haven't picked up any real projects yet.
Yeah.
So,
It's so nice to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's a blessing. Like I know it's definitely a blessing because everybody's not able to do that. So
Right. Okay, so one thing I want to make sure that we talk about. So when we first talked, you were on. I'm talking about your first pregnancy because then we're going to jump into what happened with the second delivery.
Yeah.
You were taking a prenatal, but remember it was a gummy. It was not it did not have iron. And so for people listening, for Black women prior to, I don't know, maybe it was a couple years ago now, if someone who was African American had a hemoglobin that was less than 10.2, then they would have intervention. And then if you were not African American, you're Caucasian, you got intervention when it dropped below 11. And so if you're listening to this, understand that bleeding too much following delivery is one of the main causes of death following delivery in women. And so we like to make sure that women show up to delivery with a really good hemoglobin if they can. And part of that is taking a prenatal with iron. So if you are going to take gummies, make sure that you take an iron supplement. Because that was one of the first conversations that we had. And I thought about it after she hemorrhaged. I was like, you know, can you imagine someone who starts out with a lower threshold? How much lower her hemoglobin could have gotten. And so I think about that all the time. So if you're listening, watching, make sure that you are on a prenatal vitamin well before you get pregnant, and also make sure that it has iron in it. Because I love gummies, so that's what got me into my preeclampsia situation. Because I was definitely anemic during my first trimester of my pregnancy. And so we make sure that ladies just know to check the back of their prenatal vitamins, because we would never think that something would be approved that didn't have iron in it because of how important it is. Now here's sweet baby. Are you gonna bring her down?
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead, please do.
now I do have to feed her.
Okay, it's fine. All right, so here we have the beautiful Nyla. Hi.
Say hi.
Say hi to everybody. Yeah. Oh, they're about
smile.
to hear your beautiful story. Yes. Okay, so let's jump into your second delivery, right? So, or leading up to the second delivery. Okay. So, how do we feel leading up to second delivery? Good, confident,
Confident.
right? Okay.
Good, yes.
Okay.
So the main thing I wanted in my second pregnancy or second delivery was to go into labor on my own. So that was like my main goal. I know I wanted to feedback, but the main goal was to just see my body do what it was supposed to do. The first time that didn't happen. And so I just really wanted to see my body, you know, just go into labor on its own and not have to, I didn't want to go over, you know, the time that they say.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so you want me to go into like
Yeah,
that? Okay, so
yes, please. The whole lead up to it, like everything, please. Yeah.
Okay, so close to my due date, in my head, I was thinking like last time it went over the due date. It went almost a week over the due date. And so I was thinking this time it would be the same thing. So I just wasn't pressed about the due date. I was like just at peace. The due date came and left. and I was still like fine. I was like, it's okay if I go up to a week. And another thing I forgot to mention earlier was with my doctors, I had expressed or kind of pushed back on them saying that I had to deliver by 41 weeks. And I was telling them, like, what if nothing's wrong? Like, what if everything's fine, my body's fine, and there's no problems? Like, can I go over? And so they were, the doctor that I had spoken to that time, they said yes. And if nothing's wrong, they can see, you know, if they can go over a few more days. So I was already, you know, excited about that. But I wasn't that far past my due date when I went into labor. So,
yes.
Yeah. I went into labor on my own.
Yes.
And the water broke like 2 days later that morning. And that pop sound that people talk about, I experienced that. It was like I was in the bed and I felt a little like drizzle. Then it was just that like in my body. And then it was just a rush. Yeah. And all of it didn't come out at one time. I was surprised about that because I'm thinking like all of it just empties at once in a span of 15 minutes. No, it was all day.
All day.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting there. I think my husband was off. Cedric was home, I think. I know my dad was here. Mm-hmm. I was just excited. Yes. That day you came by, you brought me some like diapers, pads, like fruit. It was on. So, and I was just really just confident that I was going to go into labor. I mean, not go into labor, but deliver vaginally. So I was really confident about that. Now, later, after you had visited us, I wasn't feeling like the contractions as much as I was in the morning time. So in my head, I started to just kind of like, just get a sense that I should just check on it. Mm-hmm. And I remember, you know, you guys telling us that we can go to the hospital and get checked and then come back home.
Right.
And so that was my goal. Yeah. And I did get a little worried. So I was like, you have to go, you know, just check. And I thought that was going to be it, and I was going to come back home. Yeah. But that wasn't it. So we want me to go into that whole...
Yeah.
Okay, so we went
as much as you feel comfortable.
Yeah, we went to the hospital that we were supposed to deliver at, and I told them that I just want to be checked, like the baby's heart rate checked. But I didn't want to stay. And the moment I got there, I could tell, like, the nurses and everybody there was not on my side. They were like snickering amongst themselves about the fact that I wanted to go home, and they were like, "You're not going home. Like your water broke. That's it. You have to stay here." And so from that point on, I think a little bit of discouragement has set in, and I wanted them to just check and let me go home. They were just, I could hear them like I was behind a curtain. I could hear them talking amongst themselves like, oh, she thinks she's going home, like she's blah, blah, blah. And then the nurses would come back to me and try to be really sweet. And it was like, I already heard them. And they were trying to convince me to stay and do all of my laboring at the hospital. But since I didn't intend to do that there, I really was uncomfortable with laboring there. I already had in my mind that I wanted to labor at home. Yeah. And by the time they checked the heart rate, the baby was stressed. They said the heart rate wasn't looking good. The heart rate was too slow, or it wasn't fast enough. And so they said the baby was under stress. And in my head, I wonder, like, if it was like the stress of my first interaction with them that caused it to happen. Like, was the baby under stress when I got there, or did my stress, cause the baby to go? Stress. Yeah. So I was hooked up, and they told me that I would have the C-section like within the hour. Yeah. And so everything that I felt like I was working towards or was confident about kind of just ended really quickly. And I know what made me confident was that I knew my body like wasn't under stress. I was monitoring, like you guys were telling me, my body looked fine, my data looked fine. So that's what I was going off of. And then, so when they introduced the idea that the baby was under stress, I didn't have a way, to prove that that wasn't the case. So I just knew what my body was. So I remember, calling you, and you had talked to them, and to see if there was anything else that could be done, like to see if I could just sit there for a while. I forgot what they had said I could do, but I know that we had tried different things. So we tried to just I don't know. Do you remember what
think,
it was?
I think that what was good, because what we were hoping for was, since you couldn't go home, that you could at least be there in labor some, even though that was not the ideal situation. And even though they had said that that was an option initially, they were like, no, we just feel like that's, we're not able to do that now. But what I was happy about in terms of you was that you had done so many things at home to progress and do the different positions, things that I feel like a doctor's office should offer you to do while monitoring the baby, because it doesn't hurt to wait a little bit, especially if you're being monitored. And I think that's when I hear people, and I've heard this term now that they say, I didn't have a failure to progress, it was a failure to wait. I just think about that sometimes, that nobody wants anything bad to happen to your baby. You don't, they don't, we don't. Yeah. But is there harm in just giving you a little bit more time? And they were like, no, we don't have time. And so I think that was the most discouraging part for me. But I also know that you did a lot of the work at home of bouncing on the ball, of going up and down the stairs, of walking, of doing the things to try to progress labor. Yeah. And so you had already given yourself that chance that should have been given to you at the hospital.
Yeah, so it's hard to remember everything, but now that you're saying it, it did offer that at first. And I was like, no, I don't want to do it here. I want to do it at home. But then once I did decide that I wanted to do it there, it was too late.
It was taken away. The option was taken away from you. And I think that that's the hardest part. But that there is nothing wrong with your body. And I think that taking that away, it matters. And I will just say that I don't feel like I think that sometimes what we need from providers is a reason to go forward with a procedure. Like, we need to know, why is this necessary? And I think that averting a negative outcome is a good reason, but it's also a risk that a mom should be able to say, well, that's a risk that I'm willing to take. Can we have an hour? Or can we have 2 hours? Or can we have 30 minutes? Yeah. And I think that was the bad part, where they were like, well, the baby's not moving at all. And so, well, then the question is, well, is the baby sleeping? Is the baby tired from laboring all day? There are other things that could be happening other than something being wrong with the baby. But like you said, when they said that the baby's in distress at that point, then you have to trust. You just have to trust them.
Yeah, so the thought is like, okay, would I be negligent if I just ignored that? It's kind of like, it's a little bit of a fear tactic, because how can I say, like, oh, I don't care the baby's stressed, I want to wait, They know, I feel like they know what to say, to kind of get in your head a little bit. And I got that sense, because of who was delivering the news and my experience with her before, and it was a lot of that. So, but my husband and I, we had prayed, when we got that news, and then I knew, I had been saying the whole pregnancy, like, God, you are Lord of my body and you're Lord of my baby. So even whatever happens, I knew He would take care of me and take care of the baby. So
yeah. Well, He took care of y'all very well. He did, and I love. We're going to talk about your time at the hospital, but your recovery this time was so much different. It was so much faster. It was so much better. You were so prepared and just so strong. I think that as a woman, when we have goals and we don't have that thought process that you have, which is you're God of my body and God of my baby, it can be really hard to accept when things don't go the way that we plan. But when you know that he's with you and He's protecting you and He will heal you, regardless of motives of providers or anything else, there is a sense of peace that comes along with that. Yeah.
There's always an element of not being in control. Like, as much as we want to control, it's just always an element of just not being in control. And I think my first pregnancy, I struggled with that after delivering. I struggled with, like, my body failed. Like, it didn't turn out the way I was just really intending on it to go. I was reading books about, like, not magical, but miraculous, like, pain-free vaginal birth. And, that didn't happen. So I really had to lock in this time with, being okay with a different outcome than I expected. So I think that's what helped with the recovery too.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this. So you told them that one of your big concerns was that you hemorrhaged the first time.
Yes.
You kind of wanted closer eyes on you, things like that, going into this delivery. All right, so let's talk about what happened post-delivery. So you deliver this sweet baby girl.
Okay. And
she's beautiful and fine. What happened with you?
So, first of all, I felt fine. So after, that's the part that, I felt fine. This time I was looking out for the fatigue. I was looking out for the dizziness, the being out of it. I was looking out for all those things, and I felt fine. But one thing that remained was the high stress on the watch. And so even the nurse that I had, when I mentioned, wanting to have my hemoglobin checked, she mentioned, she was like, I don't think anything's going on with you. Like, you're fine. Like, you look fine. and I know we don't go off of looks, but in my head when she said that, I'm just like, you're right. Like, I don't feel what I was feeling last time. And so I was actually almost about to ignore the data, but you and Dr. Amber had reached out, and you guys were like, hey, your stress is remaining high, so you probably want to get that checked. But I had to push back with that, because the nurse didn't feel like I looked like I needed a blood transfusion. She wasn't going to give it to me. So I was asking if I could just have like maybe an iron transfusion or something, iron infusion, or something of that nature. And I think when they first checked my hemoglobin, it was at a level that was safe to them.
Right, it was like 7.9.
Yeah. So they didn't want to check it again. But my stress was high, and so I kept having to push back. You encouraged me to advocate. You encouraged me to just keep asking and just talk about the fact that I'm fearful of the same thing happening as last time. So the nurse finally just, gave in and checked the blood, and I'm thinking still that nothing was going to come back. But I was like, it's just better safe than sorry. And when it came back, it was, I think, 5.1.
It was low.
Yeah. So the nurse was shocked because she had so much experience that she didn't like the fact that I was communicating with you guys. She didn't like the fact that I had physical therapists, telling me about my body. She didn't think it was connected. So when I told, I didn't tell her too much, but she knew I was communicating with you guys. She knew I was going off with the data on my watch, and it was a little bit of an attitude towards it because she wanted what she thought, to be true. Yeah. And when she saw that, it was kind of like she had a little egg on her face, or she had to she had to take back what she was saying because it was so long. She was like, "You're not going anywhere. You need to get blood."
Right. And Monique, I love that you stood up for yourself. I was just talking to a group of ladies today, and they're actually going to be OBGYNs, and they said, I love that you all have this data because it should be enough that a mom asks us to look into her symptoms, but sometimes it's not. And so you have to push back, and it's easier to do it if you have data to stand on, because if you didn't, I'm looking at your steps. If you walked up the steps with a hemoglobin of 5, right? Yeah. This is how bad things happen, and you have 2 children to take care of, and it doesn't have to turn out the way that it turns out with moms sometimes, but as providers, we have to be willing to pause and say, vital signs don't lie. That's the thing. It's not just stress from nowhere. It's heart rate variability. It is a metric that we all learn in school, and it's what happens between the beats. Yeah. And so we should be able to give credence to someone is in the sympathetic nervous state, fight or flight, as if a bear is chasing you, and you just had the most beautiful miracle of your life happen. So that shouldn't be your state. Right? Your heart rate shouldn't be that high. Your blood pressure, even though they were saying, okay, well, not the watch, but your blood pressure was low. So it's not just that it was you saying it. It was you stood up and you felt like, you couldn't walk away from the bed. Get back in the bed. And so I think that sometimes if we have experience, we would rather trust experience more than we trust objective measures. And so the fact that you stood up for yourself, like Dr. Amber and I were like, this chick, right? Because every time someone is made to look at something differently, like I don't know that you understand it, or that the other Miss Moms understand it, you are changing the way healthcare is done. Because the next time someone says, I don't feel good, can you look into this? They might just say yes. Because I remember the time I almost didn't look into it and her hemoglobin had dropped just like that. And so I think, and then just your diligence in wearing the watch. What if you forgot it? What if you didn't have your charger? What if we didn't know you as well as we do? Because every day you wake up, you sync your watch, we see it. Like, it takes a whole relationship. It takes trust. You know what I mean? And we were so proud of you. Because we think about it, like, you didn't go through everything that you went through to bring your 2 babies here to leave them for Cedric to raise. Right? And that's what we have to think about as providers. As a physical therapist, I saw people die. You know what I mean? And I was expected to go on and see the next patient. Right? And so it's like, something happening to you, yes, that would hurt them. They would go on to deliver the next baby. Right? No. Your family is left picking up the pieces, your friends, your children, and it's not worth it to leave just because somebody's trying to rush you out of the hospital. Right? And so to see you in that state, though, because for those who do not know Monique, she is not she's very like peaceful, and
I don't like to rock the boat.
Right? Oh, but tell them what you said this time. It's your boat, and your baby's in that boat. When she said that, I was like, it's so true. Yes. Right, you gotta rock it sometimes, and she's worth it.
And to me, that's the confidence that I got just from the meetings and you guys talking to me. Like, nobody's gonna stand up for you like you. Like, that's their job, and they see hundreds of people, throughout the week, and so sometimes you have to be the one to speak loud about yourself so that it can be on somebody else's radar, because everybody kind of thinks about themselves,
Yes.
They're not always thinking about somebody else. And I want to say I feel like at that point I trusted you guys more than my providers the whole time. So,
and I think that the key is to find providers that you can trust too, right? Like with my midwife, I trusted her, and I knew that if she said we have to go to the hospital, that something was really wrong, because she knew me, she knew my desires, she knew what was important to me. But I also will say that I am more of a risk. I just am more of a risk taker, And so when she was like, preeclampsia is like right here, we need to go to the hospital, I was like, is the baby okay? Am I okay? Are we good? And she was like, yeah. And she was like, so we could try at home, but understand that if your blood pressure gets to a certain level, we have to go to the hospital. I was like, let's try at home.
Wow.
Right? And so that's how I ended up delivering Krista at home. But it's like, I think that everyone has a risk tolerance. And so then you, at the end of the day, have to make the decision, because if anything happened to Krista Lily, I knew, I felt like you, like I felt like nothing was going to happen to her. I also knew there are objective measures that we can look at to make sure that she's okay. And so my midwife was willing to do that. I think that that's the key, is having a provider that's willing to give you that peace of mind. Because if you don't have that, then you have to make the decision that you would make as a mom. Get this baby out. Y'all are not going to watch it. We got to get this baby out. If you have a more supportive team that you can trust, then you know that decision is never going to be made until it's absolutely necessary. And that's why I think that when you talk about vetting, that is so important. And then it's still limited, though. It's still within insurance restraints sometimes, or distance from your home, and so you're choosing from the best of what's out there.
And I think the vetting process can even start like before pregnancy, because I'm thinking about, I had one doctor for Naomi, one doctor for Nyla, but I'm thinking about like starting to look if I get pregnant again, starting now, so I'm not waiting until it's like a crunch time,
right.
So just noticing when I'm not under the pressure of pregnancy, what the conversations are like, what are their views, and so hopefully it's not right away that I get pregnant again, but so I'll have time to maybe vet somebody more.
Absolutely. I think that that's so important. And the other thing, when you said the iron, I remember that initially when you told us about it, they were like, well, they're telling you could choose iron or transfusion. And then you were like, oh, okay, I want a transfusion. They were like, oh, no, we have to do iron, right?
Yeah.
But for people listening, just understand it takes iron time. to make more hemoglobin. So it's not like you take the iron and then all of a sudden your hemoglobin is going to go up, which is why the immediate like improvement of the transfusion is seen, because that is actually the hemoglobin and the other parts of blood, but the hemoglobin being put into your body so your hemoglobin levels go up. And so there are risks that come with transfusion. So of course, no one wants to take a transfusion if they don't absolutely need it. But considering her circumstance and what they found, of course, when they saw the numbers, it was crystal clear what was needed. But iron is not a magic, like, it's not magic. And it's just a tool that the body uses to create hemoglobin, and that process takes weeks. And so we have to just keep that in mind, that if you are someone listening to this and your provider gives you iron and you leave the hospital, then you have to think, how do I modify my activities so that I am able to function with the amount of oxygen that I have in my body? Because if normal hemoglobin is 13 to 15, and now you have someone who's operating at a 7, then that means that they might not be able to go to the newborn visits, or might not be able to go up and down 20 steps, or, you know, just be as active as they would be before. And then they do need to be monitoring things like their heart rate. If less oxygen is in the body, the heart rate's going to pump faster so that you can still get what you need. And so figuring out, what is that cutoff where I feel dizzy, or where I don't feel dizzy, but I can tell my heart is racing. And so I'm just going to stop doing the activity. And so in Monique's house, she has like this beautiful setup, where everything is like right where she needs it to be. And I would love for you to talk some about your postpartum, because even though, I mean, she's leaving the hospital now, once she got the transfusion, her body was beautiful, she was charging, her stress was down, her heart rate was down, her oxygen was up, so everything looked great, but she's still functioning at a 7.9. And remember, normal is a 13 to 15, and for her, she was closer to 13. She was looking real good before she got pregnant. And so what did you do this time around to adjust to the postpartum period? So tell us. I'm excited. I'm just excited.
Okay, so first of all, I set up where I had a lot of support from family. So I don't think it would have been as smooth if I didn't have that support, because this time I have a toddler. And I knew that she takes a lot of energy that I wasn't going to have. So I had my dad was here right away. I had my brother here. And I was telling you, like, it was mostly men.
Boy power. I was like, what?
My husband, my brother, my father were the first, support that I had this time around. Yeah. And so my father, he would take over completely with my oldest, Naomi. And so in the mornings, he would wake her up. I was able to stay in bed as long as Nyla was sleeping. And he would, get Naomi ready, do her breakfast, and even during naps, so like when Nyla was asleep, I would be able to go to sleep when she slept, instead of having to entertain Naomi or just worry about her. So that support was the main thing, but making sure I got sleep. I know this time around I was drinking way more water, so I don't know what I was thinking the last time, but I was not drinking enough water. And this time I had a jug on my bed. I had the stainless steel cup down here. So drinking way more water, trying to eat well-balanced meals. My father was cooking. Wow. My brother was cooking. My husband, he was going to work, so I didn't expect, him to do all of those things. But he was still a support at night, so he didn't just leave, the diaper changing and everything up to me. We both got up when the baby got up. So I was in charge of breastfeeding. He was in charge of the pamper changes. Delegating helped a lot. And so I wasn't able to, pick up my toddler. That was hard, for almost a whole month, because I was healing. They said don't pick up anything heavier than the newborn. So I wasn't able to pick her up, but just trying to make her feel included helped a lot. Yeah. Wasn't going back to work. The first time I went back to work right at 6 weeks. This time I didn't have a job lined up anyway, so I wasn't looking for one right away. Yeah. So just making this my main thing, making recovery the main focus. Yeah. And that's what helped. So.
Yeah, your data was looking beautiful very early on. It was just, I was like, she's getting more sleep than me.
And I was shocked because it wasn't that much sleep, but the quality. Yeah.
It's such good quality.
Yeah. So my body battery bounced back. I was seeing 100% days, 90s. And before that, it was just stuck at 5. So I'm like, I've never seen a battery charged to 100. I've never seen that, even before I was pregnant.
Right.
Then I was like, what is going on? It was like
support.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that we underestimate, and I'm not saying the value, but like, we do underestimate the value of community, that community can have in fighting the maternal mortality crisis. Like, moms would not die at the rates that they do if they had the support that they have. And when we look at, I went to this conference, and I love this Dr. Callan. She talks about moms' hearts and how 35% of women die from cardiac-related issues. And I just think about it. What if you were running around this house by yourself with no help? Husband is working because somebody has to work if we're not. And it can take a toll on us before we know it. We can be in a situation. And even just having all the help, it helps us to be able to slow down and listen to our bodies. It's not always what's on the watch. It's how do I feel, And you're able to do that because you guys prepared for it.
Yeah. I could imagine, like, at the 6-week mark, they say you're healed from the C-section, but we know that it's 7 layers of surgery. I feel like I can move around, but you have to still be conscious of the fact that your body's still healing. It doesn't just take 6 weeks.
It doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I want you to do 2 things for me.
Okay.
One, what advice would you give to a woman? And I know that you've given some tidbits of advice, especially about bedding, for sure. But what advice would you give to a woman who is trying to get pregnant? So there. And then any advice that you would give along the motherhood journey, which you think was one of your biggest takeaways from both of your journeys, really.
Okay. So as far as trying to get pregnant, I would say learning your body is the most important thing. So I know we talked about like knowing our cycles. We talked about like knowing when something's different in our data. I would say just learning what's normal for you, what's not normal, and getting rest. I would say treating your body well. Like, I know a lot of things are out of our control, but eating well, making sure you're getting that balanced diet, prioritizing rest, prioritizing things like meditation or prayer or time for yourself, those kind of things. I would say one of the things that I know we're going to talk about soon, but Dr. Amber would send me the affirmations along her text messages, and the mental fight is sometimes stronger than the physical one. So being in a good mental state, staying in a positive mindset, all those things.
Yeah, I love that. And so you feel like that would be, because I think that the mental, when you said that, I was like, it's so true. It is so much more mental than physical, right? Especially kind of depending on your community, like who's around you and what they're saying. And so it's, if you have a provider who is 100% supportive, you have less of that mental work to do. But if you run into a situation where you don't have that, then you have to do it on your own.
I would add, because I was speaking with my sister who eventually wants to have kids, and she was telling me, she was like, well, I don't have all the people that are going to help me like you have. But I was telling her, like, even before she's pregnant, try to build community. Try to just
There it came out.
There you go. Try to build community now, or think about who you will want to know your medical information, who you will want to be at your house, or if you want people at your house, like who you would want to drive you if your husband's working or you're by yourself, those kind of things. Like, build community now. Don't wait until the week before. So.
Right. Yes, because it takes a lot to trust people with your kids. I think that part people don't always understand. And then lastly, I hear your. I was going. Wait,
I don't think she ever went to sleep.
She loves hearing your voice clearly because she was quiet. Could you give a shout out to Dr. Ambra? So when she hears this, because she really wanted to be here, y'all. Ambra is in love with Monique. And when Monique first came on, I was loving on her. And I was very reluctant to allow Ambra to love on her because I love her so much. But Dr. Ambra loves women in a way that is unmatched, really. She doesn't wait for data to be off for her to reach out. She proactively reaches out to see, how is your pregnancy going? How are you feeling? She is a mom and she knows that things just happen. And it's nice to have somebody to talk to. And so her love of women let me know that anybody I put into her hands would be in great hands. But as I got to watch her interact with the moms, I was like, this is what I want for every mom. This is what I want if I get pregnant again, right? Because she just is that source of love. And she has life happening, of course, but we never know it because she is constantly and consistently, lovingly reaching out to moms and letting them know that they're supported, that they are strong, that they are beautiful, that they are doing a great job. And I think that she has really shown me what I want in everybody who monitors. Because it is a sacrifice of self to love on women. And so I just want to give you a chance to tell how she impacted you. I know it'll mean the world to her.
So I know you talked about, you didn't want to hand me over, but I can honestly say...
I didn't hand you over, did I? I'm a helicopter monitor.
Not fully. But instead of maybe missing out on the love, I just had it double. So I felt like the same heart that you have when you were monitoring me, Dr. Amber had that same heart, that same level of care, that same concern, and I could always count on, even if I wasn't on top. Oh, sorry. Even if I wasn't on top of my data, I could expect Dr. Amber to reach out. I could expect her to put a positive spin on what I was going through. I know during the week that I was due, she was calling me. So she'd be at work, but she would make time to call me on the phone and just talk to me about what I was feeling, talk to me about what maybe the doctors were saying. And she has this peace about her. Even her voice is peaceful. So it's
yes,
this soothing voice, and she's like, "Oh, Monique, she was so sweet." And I can just say, I can definitely feel her heart. Even though we're talking on this this platform where we're just messaging, I can feel her heart. I can feel that she cares.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Amber. I'm going to say this. Thank you so much. I know I've said it before, but I can't say thank you enough. I definitely loved you as a Miss Monitor. If I get pregnant again, I definitely don't mind having you as my monitor again.
So sweet. So sweet. I am so full of joy, and I love hearing babies talk, cry, communicate. So I hope you all do too. But what I would just want to say about Monique's story is that our goal with Operation Miss is, of course, for people to not have unnecessary interventions, not have unnecessary complications, and also that if something happens that's unexpected, that they come out like she has, not feeling defeated, but feeling empowered. And I just feel like her story needs to be amplified, magnified. She did everything that she could do. And then she ultimately chose the health of her baby over everything else. And so now she's here, and it's because Monique listened to her body, and she was willing to go in, even though, nobody wants to go in too soon, because we know that intervention can be had. But the beauty of her is what I hope you hear in her story. The power, the preparation, none of it was in vain. And when she said, when I get pregnant again, if I get pregnant again, we hear women saying, I don't want to get pregnant again because of their stories. But now we get to hear women who are open to doing it all over again. And it makes me so happy. And it's because you have all the tools you need. So even if she didn't, she wouldn't need a monitor next time, right? She knows how to do it. She's got her family support system, everything. It is fun to go through this process together. But we love for women to be able to check their data. You heard her say she checked her stress maybe too much. No, she was using it to guide her. And that's what we want. God gave us this ability to communicate with our bodies for a reason. And so this technology is here not to be ignored. Heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen, stress, sleep quality. It gives us insight into how we're doing. And when I tell you she's thriving now postpartum. So thank you all for listening. We are going to love on each other now and enjoy some fruit because she has fruit for me here. I can't wait to have it. But this has been a joy. And Monique, I am grateful, so grateful that you trusted us with your journey. And that you are still trusting us with your journey because you're stuck with us forever. I love you.
I love you too. Thank y'all.